Welcome into Anita on the Mark. That is me, and we're talking about the Diddy trial. And of course, my partner in crime, no pun intended. Ooh, that didn't sound right, Nevin. Nevin Shapiro, who's
No
been with
offense
me
taken.
for 4 weeks now. Nev, can you believe 4 weeks? We're into 4 weeks of this Diddy trial. It is
Uh,
flying by, dude.
This is like a real Netflix binge for me. I love it, Anita.
Well, I have a friend whose daughter works for Netflix, and she was telling me like all they want from pitches is
Hmm.
true crime. Is
Yeah,
true crime.
we're
So
getting
I
it.
guess
We're
I
getting it
guess
here.
we're onto something.
Yeah, I love it. We're getting it here.
And so just to kind of give you an idea, again, 4 weeks in, you might be saying, "Ooh, how much longer?" I'm, like Nevin, you're mesmerized, or you like, "Ugh, when is this damn thing going to be over?" Well, here's where we are at. Of course, and we've been on this ride with you, right? Jury selection, the jurors being sworn in, opening statements was a really big deal. And where we are right now is the prosecution is making their case. That's where we're at right now. What's to come? The defendants have to make their case. The prosecution has a rebuttal case, closing arguments, jury instruction or jury charge, jury deliberation. Who knows how long that's going to take? A day, an hour, a week, who knows? The presenting of the verdict, and then, of course, sentencing. So, as you know, or as you can see, we still have a lot coming your way. So, as always, we like to look at the trial, get you up to date on what is happening, specifically what has happened this week in week 4. And we always bring in the most amazing guests. I think that's what makes the show so special, besides, of course, Nevin and I. And today we have Colton Seale, who's joining us. Colton is a retired FBI agent, ranging from kidnapping to white collar crimes, an interrogator with terrorists in Pakistan. In fact, counterterrorism flight team was part of the team that went into Bin Laden's compound. I mean, Colton,
Hmm.
that's an episode within itself, and known as the living lie detector. Good thing I don't date you. But Colton, thank you so much for spending some time with us and joining the show, man. I'm impressed. Those that's
Is
wow.
that all you have on your resume?
I think that about covers it.
Yeah.
But awesome, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so again, if you can, like, share with our viewers, our listeners out there, how you got into this line of work, and what makes it so significant, and what you're going to add to the podcast in regard to your wealth of knowledge and expertise.
Cool. So I started off my FBI career in Anchorage, Alaska, and got to work about everything the FBI works there. As you mentioned, like murder for hire, kidnapping, bank robberies, all that. Human trafficking. We had a human trafficking task force that I started there. So it's fantastic. And then I moved on to the counterterrorism fly team, where I spent 6 years overseas talking to terrorists and responding to terrorism events and the like. And that was awesome. And the last part of my career was with the High Value Detainee Interrogation Group, where I developed for the U.S. intelligence community our model for how do we talk to people effectively who don't really want to provide us the information that we need. And how do we do that in a way that isn't torturing people, essentially.
And maybe it's a stretch here, but just in reading right before this trial began, Colton, is the fact that there were a lot of witnesses that did not want to cooperate, and not that they didn't want to, they just didn't want to testify. They didn't want to be a part of this.
Right.
So I mean, I would imagine that that's got to be a very special skill set, right? To interview those, try to get the information out of them that the prosecution is going to be able to utilize at its best, and maybe change their mind and get them to take the stand, and get them to testify. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, coming up to trial, that's always the scary part is, are these people going to show up and actually testify? And how do you work with them beforehand to gain their trust, right? Colton talking to the witness and get that trust between the two of us that allows them to walk into that courtroom and testify with the right mindset that they're willing to do that. And
Before we start really breaking down all that happened this week, I know Nevin's got some questions for you, but I guess my first question is based on, again, we're in week number 4. Everybody that I know is following this trial. Obviously, I'm certain that you're following this trial. What is your perception? What is your opinion of where we are right now?
so far, I think they've done a really good job in laying out a RICO case. That said, there are some tough hurdles that they've got to overcome, right? The idea that the women were coerced into these activities is a really hard thing to prove when you have texts that are going to introduce some doubt. So the ability to overcome that and show how, even if they've felt something for Combs, there's still that coercion happening. And that's going to be hard, but I think they're doing a good job at it.
Yeah. So, Colton, I wanted to ask you something. So, as far as the witness preparation, how significant is the witness preparation as opposed to just the witnesses coming up and just speaking from their heart, the emotion? Obviously, there's been, Cassie set the table for the whole thing, but I think there's been some other significant participants beyond her. I think she set the table for the gore of, I guess the word Anita used was heinous individual conduct that this guy's had. How much of it is the witness preparation and from your experience?
There are two things. One is they're trying to remember events that happened years ago in some cases, right? So it's how do you interview the person effectively to help them remember what happened without coaching them or guiding them on what happened, right? And so you're not giving them the answers. You're pulling those answers out of their memory and working with them to do that, which is a hard skill. And the other part of witness prep is they're going to get cross-examined, and having them feel confident going into that they can handle that, right? Because they are going to be questioned about whether there was some consensual activity here, and having them ready to be able to answer those questions. Again, not giving them the answers, but asking them the questions that they'll be asked on cross.
Right.
Yeah, I guess the conversations that I've had, and I know Nevin has had with some agents who have worked for the federal government in preparing witnesses like this. I don't think I don't think the general public, at least I didn't until I started covering this trial and began having these conversations, is the prep time and prep work that goes into really getting these witnesses ready. And it seems to me like, you're a coach, not that you're telling them what to say, but coaching them and making them better witnesses. And then once they take the stand, it's kind of like game on. And you're that coach on the sideline going, okay, don't drop the ball. Right?
It's terrifying sitting at the table wondering what actually is going to come out of the witness's mouth, for sure. But as an FBI agent, I'd probably spend days and days just interviewing the person. But then we do the witness prep with the attorneys, right? So that brings a whole different aspect to it, because we're going over the same stuff again, but now with the attorneys, and the attorneys role playing essentially what they're going to ask, but also what's going to be crossed on. So it is a long process, but you still don't know what's going to happen when you walk in that room.
Yeah. See, Anita, when we first started doing this, right, I told you, I said, this is no sprint. This is a full-fledged marathon and a Broadway show. This is there's ebbs and flows, boom, 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 and it's counter-punching. And you have two hellified legal squads: the government, which is unlimited resources, the biggest bear in the yard, and then you have a guy who's got a lot of money to pay for attorneys that the common person doesn't. And this is no first round knockout either way. And this thing's going the distance.
I just out of curiosity, I would imagine if I was an attorney prosecuting this case, Colton, would one hire you to question a witness and then have your opinion come back to that attorney like, yeah, I think this witness is telling the truth. I think this would be a good witness for, like, are they consulting with agents like you on whether or not they should put a witness on the stand?
Yeah, very, very often you will have somebody come in to interview your witness. Like I said, especially if there's a large time gap, you'd want somebody who's an expert at doing that to be able to come in and talk to them to get that story and to make that assessment relative to credibility.
Yeah, Anita, agents like Colton are they're hired guns. They are real weapons, man, at what they do. Like they are just there's a it's a skill set that the common person is just not aware of.
In regard to the investigation, right? And we've been spending a lot of time on our programs talking about the difference between, like, a criminal case and a federal case, right? And as Nevin alluded to, right, the federal government, they're the big bear in the yard. They've got countless employees. They're going the umpteen mile to make sure that they're going to get a conviction. Kind of give us a look behind the curtain in regard to the investigation that you believe, I know you weren't a part of it, but the investigation that you believe the federal government put into getting all the evidence against Diddy. Like, how long do you think that took? How many agents, boots on the ground, do you feel that took? Like, give us an idea of, what that entails for the prosecution to get all their evidence to the point where they're like, all right, we have a case.
Generally, for the FBI and the federal government, a case like this magnitude is going to take over a year at least to investigate, right? It's a long time of investigation. And a lot of times we'd have like an entire squad of agents dedicated to a big case like this. So it could be, 12 agents working on it or more, because you'll also have analysts, right? You'll have a whole analytic team. I was thinking about this case. You'd want to have a connection chart basically built out. Who's connected to who? How often do they call each other? What times of day do they call each other? Right. So you're going to have people dedicated to that, a squad of people dedicated to doing all the interviews, analyzing the evidence, sending evidence to the lab for further analysis, et cetera. So it's a large project.
Great question, Anita. And I'd like to jump in and ask Colton something. So based on your, from what your experience has been, and when you see Homeland Security show up to on an investigation on two separate coasts, what does that suggest to you from your seat? How significant the case, A, and B, how likely they have him dead to right?
I mean, that right there shows the interstate commerce aspect of it that they have to prove, right? So that's important, and that it's a pattern of activity, right? It didn't just take place in one location, but it's taken place over time in multiple locations. So they're obviously bringing a lot of resources to prove that. And I'd say, yeah, that they probably have established that, given finding all of this in different areas.
Mm-hmm.
One thing as well, and again, from what I understand, how difficult it is to get your hands on phone records. Do you feel that that's the most difficult piece of evidence to attain, based on how you have to go through the court system to be able to attain them?
I wouldn't say the most difficult, right? If you're trying to get somebody's tax records, that is the most difficult thing to get for sure. But you do have to show that a certain phone was used in commission of a specific crime, et cetera, to get a warrant for it. So it takes a lot of background effort to be able to tie every device to it to get the extent of records that you'd want to get. It's a lot of work.
Hence burner phones, Anita.
Exactly.
What'd you say?
Hence burner phones.
Hence burner phones?
For anyone who's listening out there.
Yep.
All right, gentlemen, let's recap again. It is week 4. What has happened? What has transpired so far? Mia, a former assistant, actually was on the witness stand and was testifying last week and bled into this week as well. Former assistant claims that she was brainwashed and allegedly sexually assaulted on more than one occasion. So there's the prosecution yet proving again that this is a reoccurring thing, more than just Cassie, right? What I found really interesting as well this week was Eddie Garcia, the security officer at the hotel. We've all seen the video time and time again. He was paid $100,000 from Diddy to get the hotel tape, and also had to sign an NDA. So Combs, and I'm just going to read just from the reports out there. Diddy paid $100,000 for a copy of the video. Garcia then went to his boss and said that he would do it for $50,000, and then they split it up three ways. The boss got $50,000. I think he got 30,000, and somebody else got the remainder. Combs asked for IDs from all parties involved, had them sign an NDA, and if there was another copy out there, then Garcia would have to owe Diddy $1 million. So, and this testimony is really, really important, right? Because it's presenting a cover up of an alleged crime, engaging with a prostitute, allegedly subjecting Cassie to freak offs and coerced sexual activity. So I feel that his testimony was probably, in my opinion, the most important testimony this week. Colton, do you agree?
Yeah, you have to approve the predicate acts, and obstruction of justice can be one of those predicate acts that you have to approve for RICO. So I think it was massively important testimony. And especially if you can tie the people who are with Diddy and the money to the enterprise, then it makes it even more powerful.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Anita, with that. And I think today's situations were just damning for Diddy. Damning. Like they're lining this up.
Another thing was that Eddie Garcia said that he received a call from Combs' chief of staff. Her name is KK. So again, and if you could allude to this in more detail, Colton, in regard to what the prosecution is trying to prove here, is that this was an enterprise, not just Diddy working alone.
Yeah, that it was an enterprise, that the employees were involved in the cover-up and the actual setting up hotel rooms and getting the drugs and all of that. And importantly, as you mentioned, that it's a pattern and practice, right? It happened, all these things happened again and again over time, and that the enterprise, in part at least, allowed it to happen.
And partook in it by being his bag man.
Yep.
There's your enterprise. Exactly. There's how it's not just him. His employees are acting at his direction.
Right. So it was Diddy's chief of staff, KK, who made the call requesting the video, and then it was another group of employees that came with the bag of $100,000. So there were a number of employees
we call them fixers. We call them fixers. That's what
they're fixers. I guess. Listen, didn't do a great job. That video is everywhere. Derek Ferguson is the CFO and handles all of Diddy's money. And his testimony important in regard to the pieces in tying in the racketeering charge. Colton, if you can allude to that, the importance of bringing in the money guy who handled the money in all of Diddy's ventures, and him utilizing it for both business and pleasure. How does that bring the racketeering in full circle?
I think that testimony showed that there was no distinction between Combs' personal life and his business life, right? They were completely intertwined. So therefore the enterprise does become really important, because he saw that as an extension of himself.
They pierced the corporate veil, Anita, is what that is. They're one and the same. There is no Diddy, whatever, bad boy. It's one. That's really what this is. And spot on. And let me make one other point, Anita, with regards to the people, the fixers, let's just say, for Diddy. What'll happen is the prosecution will realize, you know what, this was so strong and damning that we're going to lock in his fixers. You guys get immunity. You're going to jail. you're going to jail, but we're going to give you immunity if you just tell us what you did. And that's just how they corner you.
Yep.
I mean, that's how they corner you.
You take
And
away
Diddy
the
was walking up
options.
the stream. That's it. It's like, you're going to jail for your guy.
Colton, please elaborate.
I mean, it is taking away the options that they have left, right? And ultimately, exactly as Nevin said, do you want to go to jail to try to protect this guy who is likely going to be convicted, and now you're going to be convicted, right? So putting them in a corner essentially where they don't have a choice other than to say, yep, here's what we did.
So this is who has testified this week. What is coming up? What is following? Forensic video expert Frank Piazza is expected to testify. Can you, Colton, any insight in regard to that? What is a forensic video expert? What can you imagine that he can help the prosecution with?
I think the primary thing there would be to ensure that the video hasn't been edited, right? And that it hasn't been edited, tampered with, or anything like that, right? So that's going to be the primary thing. And they'll probably also look at timestamps and that those line up with other events to put it all together into a coherent picture.
Interesting. Brianna, and I apologize if I'm butchering her last name, Bongolan. Brianna Bongolan claims Diddy violated her and dangled her from a 17-story balcony. She's expected to testify either later this week or into next week. And then there is Jane, one of Diddy's accusers, and her real name has not been revealed. Expected 4 days for her to be on the witness stand with direct and cross. So, Colton, I want to come back to you on this. If you've got a witness it's going to take that long, 4 days for direct and cross, would one assume that she's coming to the table with some really big stuff?
Yeah, I think those two witnesses that you mentioned, I think will definitely show the sex trafficking aspect of it and the coercion aspects of it. With 4 days, as the attorneys and the agents involved, you're going to have to spend a lot of time with her because that is going to be mentally draining on her and helping her through that. Just the mental part of it is going to be tough.
Anita, you just cannot imagine what 4 days of that is. I mean, that's like a full sentence.
Yeah.
A full prison sentence.
And I would spend a lot of time with the witnesses in hotel rooms afterwards, just kind of working them through the trauma and difficulty of having been on the stand all day.
Well, Colton, it's interesting you say that because we've had 2 previous attorneys that have been on, defense attorneys, that have alluded to the fact that how unfair it is for them that, as soon as the trial's over, maybe they get, 30 minutes, if they're lucky, an hour with Diddy once court is over for the day. And then he has to go back to his cell and they don't have access to him.
Right.
So they've requested, can we at least go to, what do you call it, Nevin? I forgot. You call it.
Well, when you're in the shoe, they shut down.
The shoe, you call it the shoe, right? So the request is, could they at least have access to Diddy in the shoe until 10 p.m. So maybe you can elaborate on that, and I would imagine you agree with that.
It would be the legal end. No one gets into the shoe. The police don't even have keys. You got to get buzzed in. You're like it's solitary special housing unit. So it's secured to no ends. Even the police don't have a key. But they go to a Rockport and it's illegal. It's just a room. It's a room, but it's like him winning for the day, so he's not locked in.
Yeah.
But Colton, if you can elaborate, what an advantage that is, as you just said, like you're going to go back to the hotel room with your witness after she's has spent a day in court. You're and please share with us what do you do? How do you coach a witness that is expected to be on the stand for 4 days? And like I said, I guess a two-part question, how fair, unfair is that the prosecution gets to do that? And meanwhile, the defense, they don't have access to Diddy for very long.
Uh, Dealing with the witness, right? You're dealing with two things. One is the psychological impact of being questioned all day. And I've testified a lot, and it is exhausting when you're up there for a long period, and it's hard mentally, right? So you're going to have to deal with that, but you're also having to prepare for the next day. What is going to come tomorrow? What are they going to ask? What is cross going to look like, et cetera? That's hard. And there is a level of unfairness there, I think, an uneven playing field anyway, when the defense doesn't have access to their defendant in the evening. So when they made that request, I think the prosecution was correct in not challenging it, because they'll look bad if they do.
Yeah, agreed 100% on that response from Colton. And also, Nita, I've said this from our first broadcast. Him not getting bail was a significant blow to him. A significant blow to him. One that he may not be able to overcome. That's how significant. Which could alter the rest of his life if convicted.
Two more topics I want to tee up for you, gentlemen. One is the prosecutors want to use Diddy's jail phone calls, and just to and again, I'm reading the clip. His phone calls that he used for his birthday party to generate good publicity. Apparently, that was when Mia. He had spoken to Mia, and he was asking her to put up videos of I guess, him celebrating his birthday. Prosecutors are trying to hit back on the argument that Combs' lawyers made that Mia still had a warm relationship with Combs after allegedly physically and sexually assaulting her. So how difficult, Colton, is that for the prosecution to be entitled and to get those calls that Diddy made while he was incarcerated?
The jail phone calls are generally pretty easy to get because they're all recorded. All you have to do is be able to show that they're using them to continue the activity in some way, or to intimidate witnesses and the like. And I think that was part of the issue with Mia, among others, that they felt like they were being intimidated, right, via those calls. So I think they can be helpful in showing that. It'll be, like I said at the beginning, it's difficult to overcome that feeling that some people might have that this was voluntary activity and that they weren't coerced because of that close relationship.
Well, at the end of the day, guys, I mean, really, that's the fine line here that I like everything that I'm reading and I'm hearing and is that the defense team is admitting the violence, but defending the sex trafficking. Right. And
Right.
and Colton, I would imagine that's a really, really hard thing to do, so that a jury walks away and goes, okay, he's really a horrible human, but there was no sex trafficking. I think that's going to be a really, really hard thing to get the jury to digest and
How do you
agree
separate
on.
them? How do you separate the two?
Yeah, I think the jury will definitely see that he is a very unlikable human being, right? That's going to be clear. And so the prosecution, what they have to be able to demonstrate is what happens psychologically to people, right, that keeps them in that situation, and how the violence was used. Without the violence, these things wouldn't have happened, essentially.
Exactly.
Anita, I'd like to come back to a point that we were just talking about, that you were talking to Colton about, with regards to the jail calls. Okay. Diddy has been his biggest enemy from the very inception of this case. He thinks, and I can't say what he's thinking, but he's acting as if he's going against some amateur people on the other end. This is what these people do every day. The guy that's on with us was watching Osama bin Laden. These are the levels of people that you're dealing with. by talking to witness, like they got the answers for you. I've been through this, so I could speak, and it's great to be in the peanut gallery and not on the guillotine. But let me tell you something. This guy's done himself no favors. He has done this to himself. He doesn't have bail because of himself and his actions. And now he wants to reach out and talk. Like, I can tell you this, the way we ended up with our guest, right, which was an amazing pull on your behalf, right? You pulled this off. The mutual connection here. I know the phone calls that I put out to the other side when I was inside. And I knew they were listening. Yeah. I had no indictment. I was on a criminal complaint, but I needed my discovery. So I said, I'm not going to plead guilty until I get indicted. Well, sure enough, 48 hours later, I got indicted. Wow, look how that happened. You understand?
Loud and clear.
You're talking to the other team is on the phone with you.
Loud and clear, Nevin. All right, and this is about the third time we've mentioned it, but Colton, curious to get your thoughts on this, and I'm mentioning it because President Trump mentioned it this week when asked about a possible pardon. He was asked that on May 30th. Trump said he hadn't been approached about the legal matter, but added, "I know people are thinking about it." Trump would be within his presidential rights to extend a preemptive pardon to Diddy. The matter has to be federal, which it is. It has to be criminal, which it is, and related to something that's already been done, but the person doesn't even have to be charged or convicted yet. Colton, what are your thoughts on that? A Trump pardon for Diddy?
Like I said, I think they've done such an excellent job of just showing what essentially a horrible person he is, that it's a potential for a pardon, but I can't imagine anybody wanting to get anywhere near that from my perspective.
What? Ditto.
Nev?
Ditto. I mean, who wants, I don't have a comment.
All right. Enough said. Colton, before we let you leave, final thoughts. We'd love to have you on again for sure. Again, as I said when we started this program, we're only at the prosecution's case, right? And we've got probably another week or two of that. We haven't heard the defense yet, the rebuttal, closing arguments. All of the things. There is still a long ways to go here. So hopefully we'd love to have you back on with us. But for this episode, please give us your final thoughts and what you're expecting the next few days to come.
I think especially as the defense gets their chance, I think they're going to attack the memory and credibility of the witnesses. And I think that's what we're going to see, a lot of that, and the psychology behind it, saying, yeah, that doesn't really happen. So I think the prosecution should have that in mind, continually hammering on the fact that people can be coerced into this activity, and that intimidation does work, and it causes people to stay in situations that are not in their best interest. And if the prosecution can show that, because that's where the defense is going to go, so they need to stay on that.
Nevin, final thoughts?
My final thoughts are, I like we're not even anywhere close to the seventh inning stretch. I mean, we're just getting humming.
We're just getting humming. You're right.
We're just getting humming.
As always, thank you so much for subscribing, watching. Please give us your comments. We read them. We'll react to them. Of course, all the things in regard to all that is transpiring and what is to come. And of course, we'll be back next week with our next episode to recap the events towards the tail part of this week and, of course, the beginning of next. We'll see you then.